Um, okay. Hi. Juanita, can you see me? How do I add you? Oh, I'm accepting your. Sorry, guys. This is the first time I've done live, so I'm trying to get our speaker to join. Um, why wouldn't it let me do this? Okay.
Hi, you can see me now.
Perfect. Okay. I was like, oh man, I am totally struggling right now.
It's
Um,
okay.
okay. So, hi, Juanita. We'll wait a little bit. I guess it's not even 8 yet. We're actually really early. Well, not really early,
You
but
got 2 minutes.
2 minutes. It's early for the stereotype that Latinos are usually late. So it's early
Yeah,
for me for sure. I'm usually late to almost everything. It's a very bad quality that I have, but
it's okay. It's ingrained in our culture.
I know
So
it's so bad. Oh well. Well, how was your day today? Was good?
it's good. Definitely a busy month. Of course, Mental Health Awareness Month is always a little busier, but mental health awareness is every day for us. But
Do you guys find, and when I mean you guys, I mean like within your profession, do you find like certain seasons, especially like here in Florida, I know the seasons, the weather is usually the same throughout the year, but do you find that certain seasons have higher mental health spikes, I
yes,
guess?
actually, around the holidays, when a lot of people are actually celebrating, there's actually a lot of grief because a lot of people miss their family, or certain incidents or anniversaries or holidays are actually times where something traumatic may have happened. So
Yeah.
sometimes holidays we actually notice an influx in need. And like there's no time off when it comes to mental health. Obviously that's kind of year round. Like there's no date to say when you'll experience a trauma or when you'll lose someone, or when your life just dramatically changes. So,
Yeah.
but definitely since COVID, everywhere it's been,
Just spiking all over the
yeah, a
place.
huge spike. Like a lot of our colleagues call it a mental health tsunami, where it's like first we were focused on the physical healing, but now it's like we have a lot of stress that we've accumulated from being trapped in our homes or isolated or away from our loved ones. So all of that kind of stores in our body, and now we're trying to reintegrate ourselves back to society. And a lot of us are so anxious going back. We're so used to being in our bubble.
Yeah. I actually have been back in the office since I want to say like I think I was out of the office for about 3 months from the beginning of COVID, and now that's it. There nobody cared about everybody just stay 6 feet apart. Nobody really cared, so it's been normal for me since the very beginning. So I don't really feel those effects, but it definitely was hard for those 3 months because I lived
Yeah.
alone. I lived in Jersey at the time, and they were very strict about everything. So there was no human contact whatsoever for about 3 months, and that was what catapulted me into getting therapy, to be honest. So that is a perfect segue into our conversation that we're having today. Today, we are going to be talking about mental health. It is Mental Health Awareness Month. My name is Natalie Lonis. I am the Director of Public Relations for Latinicidad, and today we have our guest speaker, my friend Juanita Carvajal. Juanita, say hi.
Hi. Sorry, I'm a little congested today, but yeah, thank you so much for having me. I mean, I've been doing a lot of speaking events this month just for, you know, reiterating the importance of us focusing on our mental health and knowing how to seek quality treatment, especially for our loved ones and ourselves.
Yeah. Why don't you give everybody like a little bit of background as to what you do and where you work?
Okay. So I've been working in the mental health field for over 10 years, focused on community mental health, which is outpatient, working with children and families of diverse backgrounds. We work a lot with, children that have been adopted in foster care or also just experience a lot of trauma. So we do focus on populations that are lower income, probably require a little bit more intensive treatment sometimes. But my role is to kind of link our families to quality services and providers. So there are different types of treatment options at our agency. There is obviously the first is mental health counseling, and that's, talk therapy, CBT. There's different type of modalities our clinicians use, but there's also a program called psychosocial rehabilitation, and that's more hands-on activities for people that need to work on social skills, independent living skills, and med management. But we also offer free support groups for our community. So sometimes for people that are not quite ready to start counseling or there's a little bit hesitation, there are support groups to work on your mental health, whether it's dealing with grief, self-esteem or parenting. There's some type of life adjustment. There's, maybe you were recently had a chronic illness and now you're adjusting to a completely new life. So there's a lot of adjusting in that, and it does affect your mental health. I'm also a registered yoga teacher because yoga is obviously one of the biggest coping skills someone can learn when dealing with their mental health. Also, there's a lot of good breathing techniques and different lifestyle adjustments that people can do just to cope and maintain their mental health. Just like your physical health, like if you're trying to, improve by eating healthy, exercising, you also have to maintain your mental health,
Yeah.
by,
Well,
also exercising and eating healthy, but also disconnecting from, something from unhealthy environments or doing something like journaling to kind of express things that maybe you don't feel comfortable talking to someone quite yet.
yeah. Well, before we get really, I mean, you did mention a lot of ways for someone to deal with mental health and the different coping mechanisms, but I really want to engage in a discussion relating to the issue behind the stigma that Latinos have in our community. There's a big stigma on going to therapy, going to see any kind of mental health counselor. And what are your insights relating to that? Because I mean, I'll admit I'm not, I'm definitely someone that's dealt with that in my own family. And how would you suggest someone to handle that kind of a situation?
So thanks, Natalie. So culturally, we are a little bit more stubborn, quote unquote, when it comes to healing our mental health. Like we either label it as, oh, that's crazy, or oh, that's not for me, or oh, I can handle this myself. Like, why would I want to talk to a stranger about my problems? So, our community, we're still kind of bridging the gap of pertaining to the stigma. Like we still think some of us, I'll say I statements, like some people still think that, it doesn't pertain to them because they're not at a crisis level, or they haven't lost their mind, or, they don't need medication. But in reality, like we want to take those preventative approach to, take care of our mental health
Yeah.
because it does affect our physical health. So the stigma is still prevalent, our cultural background. It's like a lot of times you use religion or you talk to your family first, but sometimes your family kind of invalidates your emotions or doesn't really understand how to, quote unquote, like give advice to people that like our younger generations that are also adjusting to different, modalities. Like the issues that we're dealing with are completely different to the issues that they were dealing with throughout their generation. So,
So how do you suggest someone has like an open discussion with someone such as, a parent who's obviously decades behind in generation and definitely different lifestyles. Our parents, a lot of our parents have the typical, the struggling life background where they just focus on work and making sure that they had food on the table and all that stuff, and they didn't have the same opportunities that we have now. But we're obviously dealing with different things. So how would you suggest someone even has an open discussion with a parent to get them to be a little more open-minded relating to mental health options?
yeah, so that's a great question. So, a lot of the times, because we focus more on our physical health, like we have to look at our physical symptoms. So, if you have like headaches, migraines, your daily, routines are completely off, or you're not sleeping well, you're not eating well, like that is a complete change to your habits, and that's something that you need to bring up to like your loved ones of like, there's something, like I feel overwhelmed with my emotions, overwhelmed with my mental health. That's one way to bring it up. Sometimes, like realistically, with our older generations, like going to a doctor, like a lot of doctors are really being more proactive about linking patients to mental health services as early prevention and intervention. So even going to your doctor and being transparent about like emotionally, I'm not doing well. I haven't been sleeping. I haven't been eating well. I have stomach cramps. Like those are some of the physical signs that kind of alert, you and your body saying, okay, something is different and I need to talk to someone about this.
Yeah.
A lot of times also school resources, like a lot of teachers will recommend, and sometimes, parents are more prone to listen to a teacher or a counselor if they notice, different behaviors and classroom settings. And a lot of times we do get a lot of referrals from schools and counselors because they are more, inclined to notice changes in behavior.
Yeah.
As far as talking within ourselves and our family, like we just have to bring up the topic, just start the conversation. It's hard, like we're uncomfortable. A lot of times we, like our family, like we're still like that communication skill. Like, can we talk about these difficult topics that are bothering me? Maybe the loss of a loved one that no one wants to talk about, but everyone's still kind of, experiencing those roller coasters of a grief. Like at some point, like you can't suppress those emotions. Like the more you suppress it, the more intensifies the need to get, you know, physical or mental health
Yeah.
services.
And what would you suggest? Let's put it as an example. Like, I'm not ready to talk to whatever loved one about me wanting to go seek therapy. What are things that I could do at home that you would suggest is an alternative before I do make that step and go seek some sort of mental health treatment?
Yeah, so one is I always suggest, trying yoga, being in tune with your mind and body. That's always a practice that kind of teaches you those skills. Doing either breathing techniques. There's a lot of unique breathing techniques that kind of relaxes your nervous system, whether it's, um, doing box breathing or the 5, 7, 8 count. There's different types of breathing techniques that one can do just to focus on your mental health. A lot. Also, you can do arts and crafts, journaling. Just find something that you can focus on that you enjoy and kind of a skill that you can just practice on your own time and you can just escape from things that like are bothering you momentarily.
Yeah. The bottom
Oh,
line being letting out those emotions, right? We were
yes.
taught so much in our community to hold it in and keep it in and just keep bearing it down, and it's so bad, because it always
Yeah,
comes back up. It always, no
it
matter what.
does. Or like they're just like this is a funny example is like that new Encanto movie We Don't Talk About Bruno.
Yeah.
So it's actually kind of addressing how like we kind of suppress intergenerational trauma in our culture, where it's like we don't talk about that. That's a taboo subject. We don't talk about our mental health. We don't bring that subject up. Although a lot of us are dealing with grief, trauma, different types of emotions, we just aren't comfortable expressing them, or sitting down or going to a clinical professional to talk about it.
Yeah. And what, like, give me more info. I really don't know much about the intergenerational trauma thing. I mean, I understand its concept, but that's as far as I understand.
Oh,
What does that
that's like
entail?
a lot. Yeah, that's
Give me
interracial
the
trauma is like
summarized version. Like,
so a brief topic is like we carry a lot of like what our ancestors experienced. Like a lot of us are from immigrant families, so we're fleeing, either poverty, violence, different types of, adverse experiences that we experience in our environment. So we're kind of fleeing that experience, but we still carry that with us, although we're adjusting and acclimating to a new country, we're still like our body holds those experiences, even as young as, an infant. Like we carry those traumatic experiences with us. Obviously, it's hard for us to kind of pinpoint what gets passed down, or there's a lot of studies trying to, understand the concepts of intergenerational traumas, but basically that's just the gist of it,
the gist of
because
it.
yeah, just the gist, like
I
I'll
mean,
touch it, but like
it
it's
makes
a
a lot of
lot.
sense. It makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much that our ancestors have gone through that we are currently carrying as a burden. I mean, I don't want to
Hmm.
say it's a burden, but it is heavy, and then there's that additional layer of, like, our parents sacrificed so much for us, and now we are expected to do so much more because of those sacrifices. There's just a lot. There's a lot that I don't think gets taken into account, and
Yeah,
part of the
and
reason
those cultural
why.
expectations sometimes do affect our mental health. Like,
Yeah.
our parents, like, there's that sense of guilt where it's like, they didn't experience certain opportunities that we experienced. So there's that guilt of, like, not shaming your family, not disappointing them, or, not letting them down. A lot of those things, like, that also affects our mental health and, like,
Yeah.
the way we, carry ourselves in society.
Is there a I mean, is there like a high percentage of, like, depression in the Latin community? Is that something that studies have been conducted and they've found that it's something that's pretty prevalent in the Latin community, or
So a lot of times in the Latin community, we are underdiagnosed because we don't talk about mental health to begin with. Like we just like we focus more on our physical symptoms, that when it comes to our mental health symptoms, we kind of just like say, "Oh, I can deal with it myself," or "Oh, that doesn't pertain to me. Like I'm not crazy. I don't need to talk to someone." Um, but as far as statistics, I know we are usually 46% of the general population does seek treatment, as opposed to us, we're at like 30%.
no?
So, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to make change. We need to do better and
Yeah.
try and do some sort of release, even if it's self care, which is something I wanted to talk about. Like, self care is sort of a long arm to the mental health, being mental health conscious. What would you say relating to self care, like its importance, like what you can do aside from all the
Yeah.
things you said?
So, self-care has kind of been glamorized in social media. Like you notice, oh, self-care, bubble bath, go out, treat yourself, do this.
Yeah,
But now in our colleagues, we want to call it more self-preservation. Like, what are you doing to take care of your mental health? Whether it's disconnecting for a few hours from your phone, journaling, like something that that is you're being intentional about to work on your mental health. So, it has been glamorized. Like now, like social media, like you notice a lot more mental health awareness posts, which we really like like we appreciate more awareness in that because it is important.
yeah,
But it's also glamorized. Like sometimes some of the issues are like, you know, people in poverty or people that can't afford the service or don't have insurance to cover the service, like they go untreated. So there's that social issue as well. As far as my favorite self-care, like I do practice yoga. Um, I run, with my dog or go for a walk. I like try to disconnect with my phone, or from my phone for a bit because I use it so much for work. And also, like just our generation, we just use our phone excessively, and that's technically not as healthy. Like, and then pandemic, I think most of us, like we were glued to our devices because that was our way of connecting with others. But
Yeah.
now it's time, to get outside a little bit more, do something that you enjoy, connect with people that you love.
Yeah. I remember, so I actually am someone that I have gone to therapy. I did therapy for about a year and then I moved to Florida and I lost my health insurance. And so I'm currently in the market for a therapist. But I remember during therapy, a lot of the things that I remember I would constantly do is either fall asleep with the TV on, or I'd be looking at my phone for like 30 minutes before bed. And my therapist would always yell at me. She's like, that's so bad for you. You need to like disconnect and just be within your own realm for a little bit, especially before bed, because it leaves you with lingering thoughts. And I will always take that away because it honestly does help. And another thing that I really love to do, if anybody is kind of on the fence, meditation is amazing. If you can perfect meditation, it's great. It seriously is like the
Yeah, if
world
you
is
can be
not
in your
exist.
thoughts for like
Yeah.
at least 2 to 3 minutes, we were advised, start at 3 minutes, or you can start at 1 minute, do 1 minute a week,
Hmm.
focus. 1 minute is long for a lot of people that may have anxiety or just uncomfortable. Like we're so used to having so many distractions where it's like when we're scrolling through our phone, we are really distracting ourselves from the things that we really need to be, processing or feeling. So, starting with meditating once a week with a minute, increasing by a minute each week, like that really helps. And it is a practice. Like, although I'm a yoga teacher, I can't say I'm a expert at meditation. Like I try and do it, 5 to 10 minutes a day, or in between, a next meeting. But, we're also human. I will self-disclose that, I'm also in therapy, so I normalize, encouraging other people to go to therapy. A lot of us within our agency, we encourage our providers to go to therapy. Like we hear a lot of, you know, heavy content, information, things that like our clients share with us that, it's also in our brain, and how do we need to process that, and we need to, release that from our body as well because it does affect us. And I would say like finding quality providers. A few tips I can give is you can request like a 15-minute consultation just to see if it'll be a good fit. You can talk about what the cost looks like, what treatment options looks like, and go from there. Like usually within the first session, I would say don't give up. Sometimes it's very intimidating because you're like, this is awkward. I'm talking to a complete stranger about my problems or things that, I'm not comfortable disclosing to begin with. Like, so it does take some adjusting to therapy, and ways you can prepare yourself is, ask questions like, what does therapy look like? Like, what can I expect? And then come prepared if you have some goals that you want to work on, whether it's, managing your stress, or adjusting to a life change or a career. Say you move somewhere and you're trying to adjust or making new friends, or, you've had some, you know, problems or conflicts with family. Like those are things that you can kind of process and get perspective from a clinical professional.
Yeah, I like how the other night or your last night when we were talking about this event that you kind of said that it's very much like dating when you're looking for a therapist, and it really is like either it works or it doesn't. Like I said, I'm in the market right now for a therapist, and I've recently um, I had a couple sessions with one, and it just didn't work out. It wasn't a right fit for me, and that's okay. And I think it's important for people to realize it's not going to be perfect the first day. It's not like a first
Hmm.
date is never perfect the first time anyway. Like I mean, unless I'm going on the wrong dates, but most of the time the first date is not the best. So you give it another shot, you talk it out, and I think most therapists will have like it's like an introduction period for the first
Hmm.
couple sessions, right? It's not you're not deep diving into all your problems and trying to figure out what's going on. It's very much
Yeah.
piecemeal.
Usually your first session is just building that relationship,
Yeah.
like what is it that brought you to therapy to begin with? What are some goals that you want to work on? What do you expect from your clinician? Sometimes like you can have, certain expectations, whether it's you want a culturally competent provider, someone that is already educated in, Hispanic customs and traditions and how it affects our mental health. Like, if you have to like kind of teach a clinician like what that looks like, that's sometimes counterintuitive to your time, and you're just like, well, this isn't going to work. Like, they don't understand my background, they don't understand my triggers and traumas, so it's better off, looking at different options. There are a lot of provider, you know, rosters that Hispanic populations could look at. There's like Latinx therapists. There's Mi Mente Salud, like Salud Mente. I can share those with you so you can post them to share with the community. But
Yeah, that'd be great.
there's different resources available for us and for our, unique needs when it comes to meeting our mental health.
Yeah. And I don't know if you saw someone ask that specific question. I don't know if you were responding or you just happened
I
to
just happen to,
you happened
yeah.
to come across the subject. But yeah, I will say that I specifically only look for Latin therapists. I mean, their question was whether it's prudent to have someone with a similar background for your therapist. If that makes any difference. And me, I think it does, primarily because of the way that I was brought up. I want someone that understands that that upbringing. I mean, culturally, I had the typical Latin brought up. I was punished probably similar to a lot of the ways that everybody else is, and I want a therapist that understands that and doesn't um, I don't know, isn't taken aback because they're sadly used to it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, someone did ask that, and you hit the nail on the head responding relating to that question. So, but what
And
else?
also, if you're just not ready for, that one-on-one session with a therapist, there are also free support groups that are targeted to our community. I know I'm one of the co-founders for a peer support group called Hablemos Más, and it is, just to talk more about our mental health because we don't talk about it enough. And it's just a community of, Hispanic adults just talking about our mental health, especially throughout the pandemic, since we were, some of us were isolated or not having that family contact. Like, we needed a support, and we started that group first virtually just to kind of touch base and check in on with everyone. But then obviously within our culture, like, we love, connecting, meeting people, talking about food, dance, talking about things that we utilize to cope. So, our coping skills looks different than someone else. Like we really validate, dance can be your coping skill for your mental health, going, cooking. Like, a lot of us, like, we love to, eat our, Mexican or Ecuadorian or whatever Peruvian food. Like, that's part of our culture, and that's also, something that we utilize to, connect with others.
Mhm.
So.
Is that group online or is it in person?
So actually, it is now in person in Apopka with the Hope Community Center. So
Oh,
that is available for free. It meets the third Tuesday of every month at noon for lunch because, we're Hispanics, we love to talk, we love to eat, we love to interact. So the best way to get a group together is to offer food and to offer a fun environment.
Yeah.
And that's just the first step to talk about your mental health, you know. It doesn't
What's
have to be something very, you know,
deep?
like we want to make the environment as welcoming as possible, especially when it comes to creating a space to talking about very heavy topics. Like we want to be able to feel comfortable and connected, and also acknowledge that, you know, there is that confidentiality aspect where it's like what we do say within our group, like it stays in our group, and that's a safe space to kind of just share and release all these frustrations that sometimes we hold and we can't talk to our family about.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I mean, oh, and that kind of reminds me of what you said yesterday. Something I didn't know about how it's privileged, the fact that you're in therapy. I know a lot of people. I mean, obviously the stigma still carries on, and people still feel some sort of way when they say they're in therapy. But you were saying that it's something that's supposed to be kept private, right, from your employer or anyone else, unless permission's given or something like that.
So yeah, there are confidentiality, you know, regulations. So sometimes like, you know, there's a little bit of a fear of like, oh, if I share this, like, am I going to get in trouble? Or are they going to call the cops on me? Or, you know, is it safe for me to share what I'm feeling? Because, you know, sharing it with a family member, like sometimes your emotions weren't validated. So the good thing about therapy is that things are kept confidential, unless obviously there's safety reasons that, you know, requires further intervention. But for the most part, like most clinicians create a safe space for us to disclose very intimate topics that maybe we need to process and kind of get a different perspective on how to problem solve.
Yeah. When do you think it's like a time for, so most people can kind of they can kind of get away with not really seeking any mental health help. But when do you think it's like, okay, this is when you really need to see someone. This is like code red. Like what kind of signs should someone look out for that kind of a warning or that kind of an indication that they need to go see someone?
So that is different for everyone. Obviously, we notice different behavior changes within our family and friends most. Like obviously if they start to isolate themselves, or you notice like drastic physical changes, whether it's weight gain or loss, or you know, just something like there's always that gut feeling too where it's like something doesn't feel right, and like we all have that inner instinct. As a friend, like the best thing you can do is hold space for them. You know, express that you're concerned, and also kind of gear them into, you know, finding resource or giving them some resources if they're comfortable with getting them. Like obviously sometimes there's people that there's a little bit of hesitation of like, oh, that's none of your business. Like I'll deal with it myself. Um, but, you know, expressing that concern is the first step, and expressing that you are a support system is also an important step to um, help them feel that they're not alone in this process, and that, you know, our mental health is important. Did that answer your
Yeah,
question?
that's it. That's
Just make it, yeah. Because
it.
sometimes I go on tangents and I'm like, okay, wait, did I answer the
No,
question?
no, that was
Um,
great. Well,
and
what
obviously,
about?
if there's something like a crisis or something that, you know, someone's physically in harm, we always encourage everyone, like anyone, to call 911. That's like the first step. There's also a lot of crisis hotlines that are available. Um, that's for anyone. You know, they'll gear you to the right resource. And a lot of hospitals, mental health hospitals, also do free assessments, just to, if you need a clinical expert to kind of see of like, okay, this is where you're at. Maybe you do need, you know, to be admitted into a hospital, or if we would suggest other outpatient treatment options.
What about someone that someone that was in my predicament, that I didn't have health insurance. I actually didn't have a job at the time when I moved to Florida. So I didn't know of any other resources available to me being in that predicament. Are there any resources that are, available to people that don't have a job, don't have a lot of money to spend? Because therapy can be kind of expensive, especially if you're paying out of pocket.
Yes, it is. Yeah, right now the rates may be between 75 to $150 sliding scale. Sometimes your insurance covers it. There are certain employers that do cover what it's called employee assistance program, which is EAP, like a few sessions to talk about your mental health, and that's usually covered through your employer. You can talk about that with either HR or someone that's, you can go to talk about more resources. As far as free resources, I always suggest NAMI has a lot of resources. Here in Central Florida, there's an organization called Mental Health Association of Central Florida, and they actually have a roster of resources. They always keep it update of agencies that are offering free services. Those usually get booked really quick, and it's first come first serve. You can ask to be put on a waiting list. Um, but in the meantime, like we just strongly encourage to take advantage of those free support groups. Also, there are hotlines. Like sometimes you just need to talk to someone, and that's just the first step.
Yeah. And so, lastly, I'm trying to think. I know I wrote a bunch of notes down yesterday to make sure that I covered everything I wanted to talk about. But I feel like we've covered the majority of what we were hoping to discuss. I mean, is there anything that you think that we should add? Something, pertaining to the mental health awareness and how it's something very important within our community and, within other communities as well, to be taken care of, and things you could do to keep up to date with your mental health.
Yeah, so I know when I was dealing a lot with my mental health, my biggest support was close friends and relatives. The biggest thing someone can do is just be present. Like sometimes people aren't looking for advice, they aren't looking for solutions, they aren't like asking you to tell them what they need to do. Sometimes they just need someone to listen to them and kind of just gear them into like, hey, I care about you, I love you. You should take that next step to get more help if you're ready for it. Obviously, that's one step that I encourage, family, friends to kind of support their loved ones. Um, and two, it's like it's our responsibility, in our culture to kind of look out for each other. And when you notice, the labels, the stigma, crazy, it was the locals, like, talk, like, kind of stand up and just be like, it isn't for crazy people. We all experience grief. We all experience some type of loss, our emotions, relationship problems. Like, that's very normal in our
Life.
family, and we have to be able to talk about it.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times we just suppress it, we ignore it, or there's that custom of like like you don't talk about family issues to other people. You deal with them or you just forget about them, and that's not always the healthy tactic. Because it's stored in our body, like we all feel it. Um, so I think I told you yesterday, if we don't express it, we suppress it. So it's always there and it's not going away until you finally take that step and be like, okay, I want to heal and I want to improve myself and, be that, you know, the one person that changes the generational cycle in your family. It's a lot of work, but like one of us has to do it. One of us has to take that step to stand up for ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's get to there's some questions.
Oh, awesome.
This is my first time on live, so I'm
I
just
can't see
like,
the questions.
I see, yeah, I see. Oh, you don't see them? Okay, I wonder if it's just
Mm-mm.
because I'm the main person on here. But okay, so one is, Are there some go-to questions you should ask yourself when interviewing a new therapist?
Yeah, so some questions you want to ask is one, are they culturally competent? Obviously you can disclose like where you're from, if you have some type of religion or practice, that's also a coping skill. Some people, when we get calls from different clients, like they specifically request like a Christian or faith background. You have all right to do that. Also, another thing to ask is, have do they work with our population? There's not as many, like I'll be real with you guys, there's a shortage of Hispanic bilingual mental health clinicians. So if anyone is looking for a career change and you want to make a difference in our community, definitely consider becoming a clinician. This is my shameless plug because there is a need.
No, definitely.
And we are very busy. And yeah, like we're trying to shift and grow and heal. So it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of collective effort.
Yeah. I like
One
that.
last question also, I encourage you guys to ask is just, what type of specialties they have. Like sometimes a lot of clinicians may be like trauma informed. They may also do like different techniques like EMDR, which is like eye rapid movement. There's trauma focused, CBT. So look at like usually when you look up a clinician, they go into depth on what their specialty is. And ask questions. That's
Yeah.
always something that I encourage. And after like one session or two, if you really don't feel like there's a connect or like it's someone you feel comfortable disclosing your personal stuff, then you can move forward and say, hey, this wasn't a good fit. Like I'm still exploring my options.
Yeah.
And most clinicians are okay with that. Like that's completely,
It's the norm
acceptable.
for them, yeah.
Yeah, it
A lot
is.
of clinicians also have they have like a bio somewhere. You just
Yes.
Google the crap out of them and you'll find, I'm sure, some sort of bio that shows like their background, and
Yeah.
it helps a lot.
Psychology Today is a place where you can find a lot of bios. You can also, a lot of them also have their own website where they'll list their expertise and experience, what populations they work with. Most clinicians also may offer like a 15-minute consultation. That's where you can just talk to them and just be like, hey, this is what I want to work on. Like, is this something that you can help me with or support me? And you should be getting a very honest, transparent answer, and you can tell usually.
Yeah.
Uh, was
Okay.
there more questions?
We have another question. Can you speak on the complexities of toxic family? What are your thoughts on family members that are your biggest supporters, but at the same time, people that bring you down? Dang, that's
Oh, okay.
deep.
That's actually a norm in Hispanic cultures. Like
Yeah.
we like to say family's everything, but there's always that toxic family member that either puts you down because you're not doing enough, contributing enough, or, you know, there's always a negative comment that, you're supposed to let these comments kind of roll off your shoulder, but then you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, what is that about?
Yeah.
So how to address that? Like, a lot of sessions you talk about boundaries. So in our culture, we have a lot of boundary issues, like whether it's, that family guilt, like they make you feel really bad about, letting your family down, not being there. But sometimes we need to create those boundaries for our own health.
Yeah.
So when you're in therapy, like you learn about boundaries, what is a healthy family boundary versus what isn't, how to approach that situation. Sometimes obviously we're taught that like you respect your elders no matter what. Like your grandma may like curse you out or insult you or tell you you're the worst, grandchild ever, but you have to kind of bite your tongue and like, deal with it. So, there's respectful approaches to kind of express how that bothered you. Obviously, sometimes our expectation is like maybe we want to feel validated or maybe we want an apology and we won't get that. But at least in therapy, you're kind of taught on like, well, how to process when you don't get the apology that you were looking for, or how to process, you know, working on your boundaries with family. Like
Yeah.
it's something that we all need to work on. to an extent.
Or how to process just letting go other people's
Yeah,
thoughts. Who cares?
letting go is a
Yeah,
big one for
let it
sure.
go. All that matters is yourself, really. Well,
Yeah.
that's my own thought. I'm not saying that's should be everybody's, but I think that's the easiest way, especially when you're dealing with toxic people. I mean, some people just don't change or they don't want to change. So it makes it a
Yeah.
little
And I
difficult.
think that was our last point to address is, that toxic positivity that, is ingrained in our culture, which is just like either one, just pray about it. Like prayer is supposed to heal everything. And yes, it is a coping skill, but sometimes like prayer is not enough, or maybe prayer is not a coping skill that you're comfortable with. Um, so that's one. And then a lot of times it's just you should be grateful. Like one, it's like we should be grateful we aren't living the life that our parents and grandparents used to live, which could have been like living in poverty and but like experiencing level of violence or not having the resources that we have here in the States. So there's a lot of guilt and shame when it comes to that. Um, so toxic positivity is a big thing in our culture. How to deal with that is obviously creating boundaries, is
Yeah.
the first step. And two, it's like you can't suppress your emotions. Like we're human. We're allowed to be upset when something, affects us. Like something goes wrong. Like we're human. This whole thing of having to stay positive or looking at the bright side all the time, like is unrealistic. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's definitely that for me, that's probably one of the biggest benefits with just having even if not going to therapy, it's just having these coping mechanisms because there's a lot of unlearning that needs to be done. That me in particular, I learned crying is a sign of weakness, and I know that's very
mhm.
prevalent in our community. And I still have to this day remind myself, like, no, it's not. I'm sad right now. I want to cry. I'm gonna cry, and it's not weak.
Yeah.
But it's still a process to unlearn that when you've been told
Well,
that.
and crying is actually us releasing our emotions. Like that's our way of just kind of letting go. And I know I'm the same way, Natalie. Like I was told, why are you crying? Like, what are you crying? That's not a big deal. Like, why are you crying? It's just like I'm a human being. I have emotions. Like this is how my body is responding to what's happening.
Yeah,
It doesn't mean, I'm weaker or I can't handle situations. It's this is how my body's reacting at this time. So,
yeah, yeah. It's a lot of acceptance, but I mean, there's so much to unpack relating to this topic, but I think that we covered the majority of the main points relating to it. I mean, I don't know if anyone else has any other questions. I do want you to mention the event that you're having next month. I think with all the other minority groups. Is it next month?
oh, so
I think you mentioned
actually
that.
July is Minority Mental Health Month. Usually we host an educational series to talk about, the stigma involved with minorities and mental health because we usually are untreated or, misdiagnosed, or sometimes we don't get quality care because there's an influx of need and not enough providers that can meet our needs and understand where we're coming from. So I can give you more details there. It's still pending some, final details, but I can share that as that date approaches.
Yeah, I think we'll put it on our website or something so that people can gain access and
Awesome.
attend. I think that would be really good. I think the only way that we're going to better ourselves individually and as a community is if we start having these discussions. That's the only way it's going to happen. We need to learn what options are available and do a little bit better. I mean, I'm not, obviously it's not for everyone. I'm not trying to advocate that therapy specifically is for everyone, but self-care is, I think. So at the
Hmm.
very least, people should know the options for alternatives, and I think being present in the conversations is a start.
Yeah.
So
And just to reiterate, you're not alone. Sometimes we feel alone when we're dealing with a lot of stress, anxiety, grief. Um, but believe it or not, there is a lot of healing just talking about it with strangers. It can be very intimidating at first because, we're taught and ingrained that like you talk to your family first, or, you don't talk about it at all because you should be able to handle this. Like those unrealistic expectations. You should be able to handle this, but there is support. There are resources. And again, thank you all for having me. Again, you guys can follow pbs.fl. We um, do offer a lot of resources as well and just tips on how to care for your mental health. Another Latinx therapy, like it addresses a lot of the things that within our culture, like we deal with, which is, generational trauma, chancla culture, abuse, integrating into society. There's a lot of issues that we kind of just know exist, but we just are still kind of hesitant to talk about.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, we'll make sure we'll put all that stuff on our website so people can gain access to it, gain access to your specific employer, and kind of understand the resources that you guys have available. But thank you so much, Juanita, for joining us. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank
Went
you.
long. I didn't know. I thought I was gonna run out of things to say. I think we did a really good job.
Yeah,
So
great discussion.
yeah,
Again, encourage everyone to talk about your mental health. We're not crazy. It's not just for crazy people. We all have emotions that we're dealing with, and we just need to process them. So,
yeah, perfect. Well, have a great night, everyone. Thank you. I mean, a round of applause for Juanita for joining, and
thank you for
we'll
having me.
hope to have you again. Really
Okay.
would. Okay.
All
All right,
right. Have a
guys. We'll
great
see
one.
you. You too. Bye.
Bye.
How do I?